So hi, I'm Dan Dixon. So I'm a senior lecturer over the road at UE now, but previous to that I used to run the community software at the BBC for a while and spent a little bit of time as a consultant for a social software company. Now over at UE I lead their web design programs and also do research around the social web and where people use web and taking that away from the desktop. So what's it going to be like in the future when it's not about us kind of using the web and the desktop? I want to talk a little bit about kind of the web today and the way we use the web. So there's this kind of way of thinking about the way the web works now is that it works like a coral reef. It works like an ecosystem. I think kind of thinking back to what Tom was saying this morning, it's exactly the same as kind of looking at other ecosystems. Websites don't kind of live by themselves anymore. They're part of the whole web. They're not just kind of single sites that are about kind of putting information, putting content online. Many sites nowadays share data between each other. There's kind of APIs that allow them to interact with each other. There's content that kind of gets shared or syndicated between various sites. So I want to kind of highlight a couple of applications that are sort of coming along at the moment, a couple of web sites, web applications that kind of live inside this coral reef. They're not trying to be websites, they're not trying to be ecosystems by themselves, they're just trying to be sort of good parts or little parts of the coral reef. So the first site I want to talk about is this the site of this kind of web application called Twitter. Twitter, I mean, if you think of some of the big sites out there like BBC, like Microsoft, like Yahoo, they're the megafauna of the web. Twitter's a bit more like plankton. It's kind of small things that are kind of going on out there. And Twitter is basically SMS messages on the web. So you've got 140 characters that you can put in there and update what you're doing, what you're thinking about, what you want to say. They're kind of the half-formed conversations, so people kind of throwing conversations out, saying something, and hopefully maybe conversation will form. Does anybody here use Facebook? Who has a Facebook profile? So about half the audience? Yeah, about half the audience. So one thing that Twitter's like, it's a little bit like a status update. And in actual fact, you can get Facebook to pick up your Twitter feed or pick up the things that you say on Twitter and use that as your status update. And if you have a look up here, I've actually taken, this is the election 2008 part of Twitter. And so what they do is that they're looking at every single thing that people say. And every time something about Barack Obama or John McCain or elections or presidential stuff comes up, they're kind of looking at every single thing and they bring it up here. And if you watch this page, there's about a post a second that just keeps filtering past of what people are talking about. And if you actually look at Flickr, there's many, many more messages going up a second. So if Twitter's kind of like plankton, then Friendfeed's a little bit like a sponge living on the coral reef. So Friendfeed, you've got Twitter, you've got Flickr accounts where you might be posting photos, you've got things that are going on Facebook, you've got all these kind of different services that are kind of happening, these kind of different pieces of the coral reef of the web. And Friendfeed's kind of one of these things that kind of picks all these up and brings them together. They're like a sort of giant sponge. You can see here kind of what's going on, where people are posting on Twitter, photos being uploaded, things being uploaded to YouTube. This kind of pulls them all together. And so you can have your little social network of friends or people you know, you can see everything else that they're doing on the web in real time. I kind of finally wanted to sort of talk about this site Doppler, which probably epitomizes this idea of the coral reef. They actually talk a lot about kind of how they are kind of one little microorganism in the coral reef, or one kind of thing that's living in the coral reef. And Doppler basically it's a social networking website for frequent travelers, so for people that travel a lot. But they just do that. They don't try and expand themselves out. They don't try and do anything different. But with this, what you can do is you can hook it into all your other services. So you don't actually have to sign in to Doppler. You can sign in using OpenID. You can sign in using other services. When you sign in, you can actually get it to go and look at Facebook and suck all your friends down. So you don't actually have to start putting in all your friends. You don't have to invite them all by email. You can just suck in everybody you know from Facebook or from anything else. The maps are all provided by Google. They haven't done any of that themselves. They're using other services to kind of look up the place names. When you actually, if you go on holiday and you take photos, then afterwards when you upload them to a photo sharing service, it'll find those and attach them to your trip, so you can actually kind of have a little kind of record of everything that's going on your trip. I haven't shown up there, but they also do carbon calculations, so you can actually calculate everything that you're doing. You can sort of say how you're actually traveling from one place to another and do a carbon calculation of your trip and all your trips over a year and look at kind of what's happening year on year. And you can share that data with other people as well, so you can kind of either show off or talk about kind of how you're either using travel or what kind of carbon emissions that you might be trying to reduce. I think that's what I really want to say. Kind of idea of there being kind of this coral reef with all these kind of websites that are working together and sharing data, sharing information. And many of these, they're kind of it's a new approach. It's not trying to think about websites or web applications as being these tools for broadcasters. It's looking at them kind of as being networked applications. We're not kind of trying to put out one message to a lot of people. We're trying to talk maybe with individuals. We're trying to use something like Twitter to put out messages to people who are listening and get them to rebroadcast that. So we're kind of giving the people that want to talk about the subjects that we're interested in, who want to talk about the environment, want to talk about ecology, want to talk about changing the world, giving them the right things so they can rebroadcast that. So they might be want to put it out on Twitter, they might want to be talking about that on their blogs, and kind of eventually kind of helping to kind of transmit that message and translate it along the way, so that we're not just using kind of scientific language, we're not just kind of presenting one message, we're trying to kind of allow people to translate that out to all sorts of different audiences. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much.